Hi, Taurus. Wow, this energy feels incredibly strong. The first thing I'm picking up is that someone has been doing a lot of thinking lately. Not just thinking about you, but thinking about the choices they made, the advice they followed, and the opportunities they may have let slip away. Because what I'm seeing here is someone who spent a long time listening to everyone else's opinions while ignoring what their own heart was trying to tell them. And now, something is changing. They're beginning to see this connection from a completely different perspective. They're starting to realize that what they were searching for may have been right in front of them all along. So Taurus, let's take a look at what's happening behind the scenes and see what this person is finally beginning to understand. What keeps pulling my attention back, Taurus, is the feeling that this person didn't just get lost in their own thoughts. They got lost in other people's voices. That's actually one of the strongest things I'm picking up here. As I look at the Page of Swords, I keep seeing someone who was constantly looking outside of themselves for answers. It's almost like every time they felt something about you, every time their intuition nudged them toward this connection, they immediately went looking for confirmation somewhere else. They talked to friends. They listened to family. They paid attention to opinions that were never truly part of this connection. And little by little, those outside influences became louder than their own heart. What's interesting is that many of those people were only seeing fragments of the story. They weren't living it. They weren't feeling it. They weren't experiencing what happened between the two of you. Yet somehow their opinions carried weight. And I feel this person allowed that to happen. Not because they were trying to hurt you. Not because they didn't care. But because they were confused. Because when I look at the moon sitting here, wow! There is so much uncertainty surrounding their energy. This feels like somebody who doubted themselves. Somebody who questioned their own instincts. One day they felt close to you. The next day they wondered if they were imagining everything. One moment they saw something special in this connection. The next moment somebody else's opinion would pull them in a completely different direction. It's almost like they stopped trusting what they felt and started trusting what everyone else thought. And honestly, Taurus, that's where a lot of this delay seems to come from. I don't feel someone who lacked feelings. I feel someone who lacked clarity. Someone who kept looking around the room asking, "What do you think? What should I do? How do you see this?" Instead of asking themselves the only question that truly mattered. How do I feel? Okay. The energy gets even heavier when the Two of Swords appears, because this card feels like the moment they became stuck. Not moving forward, not moving away, just sitting there, waiting, overthinking, trying to make the perfect decision, trying to eliminate every risk, trying to make sure they wouldn't make a mistake. And while they were doing that, life kept moving. Time kept moving. The connection kept changing. I almost feel like this person convinced themselves that waiting was the safest option, that doing nothing was somehow protecting them. But deep down, they knew something wasn't sitting right. You know, sometimes people think confusion means they don't know what they want. But what I'm seeing here is different. This feels like somebody who actually knew more than they admitted. They just kept letting fear and outside opinions talk over their inner voice. And that's where the Seven of Cups starts speaking. Because wow, the energy around this card feels like someone standing in front of too many possibilities, too many stories, too many scenarios, too many opinions. Everyone offering a different version of reality. Everybody telling them what they should do. Everybody telling them what they should want. At some point, they became disconnected from what was genuinely theirs. And that's what I think they're beginning to realize now. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic movie scene. More like quiet moments. Moments when they're alone with their thoughts. Moments when nobody else is talking. Moments when the noise finally settles. Because once the noise fades, something uncomfortable starts happening. They're able to hear themselves again. They're able to look back at certain conversations, certain decisions, certain missed opportunities. And they're starting to wonder if they gave too much power to people who never truly understood what existed between the two of you. Honestly, that's the awakening I see beginning here. It's still early. It's still unfolding. But I keep hearing this energy of reflection. A person slowly realizing that some of the advice they followed may have taken them further away from what their heart was trying to show them all along. And for the first time in a long time, Taurus, they seem willing to sit with that realization instead of running from it. Because once that realization starts settling into their heart, Taurus, something else begins to surface. Not regret, not guilt, at least not yet. What I'm feeling first is appreciation. The kind of appreciation that often arrives late. The kind that only appears after someone stops looking at what is missing and starts noticing what was always there. Wow, The Queen of Pentacles is coming through so strongly here. And what keeps standing out to me is how this person views your energy differently than they used to. There was a time when they focused on questions. They focused on complications. They focused on uncertainty. But lately, it feels like they're paying attention to something much simpler. How you made them feel. How calm things felt around you. How easy it was to be themselves. You know, Taurus, not everybody brings that into someone's life. Some people bring excitement. Some people bring chaos. Some people bring lessons. But your energy feels different. Your energy feels safe. And I think that's something this person is finally beginning to understand. Because when I look at the Queen of Pentacles, I don't see somebody who is asking for the impossible. I see somebody who is offering consistency, offering honesty, offering something real. And honestly, that realization feels almost surprising to them. Because I keep hearing this energy of someone looking back and thinking, why did I make this so complicated? Why was I searching everywhere else? Why did I overlook something that felt so genuine? The answer doesn't seem completely clear to them yet, but the questions are becoming louder, and that matters. The Empress is sitting right beside this energy, and I have to say, there is something beautiful about the way they are beginning to see you. Not through other people's opinions, not through old fears, not through assumptions, but through their own eyes. For some of you, this person is realizing that you never tried to force anything. You never demanded perfection. You never asked them to become somebody else. You simply showed up as yourself. And maybe that's what made your presence so easy to take for granted. Because genuine people rarely arrive with fireworks. They arrive quietly. They create comfort. They create trust. They create stability. And often people don't recognize how valuable those things are until they no longer have access to them. Okay, the energy shifts again when the Six of Cups appears. Because this feels like somebody spending more time with memories than they normally admit. Certain conversations keep replaying. Certain moments keep resurfacing. Small moments, simple moments. The kind of memories that didn't seem important at the time. But somehow they feel important now. And honestly, Taurus, those memories don't feel painful. They feel warm. Almost comforting. Like this person is revisiting parts of themselves they haven't connected with in a long time. I keep seeing them remembering how understood they felt around you. How accepted they felt around you. How they didn't have to perform or pretend. That's a rare thing. And the more they revisit those memories, the harder it becomes to dismiss what they truly felt. Because those memories carry a truth that opinions never could. The Star is the card that catches my attention last. And wow, the feeling here is subtle, but it's powerful. It's like somebody slowly lifting their head after spending too much time looking down. Somebody beginning to see possibilities they couldn't see before. Not because the situation changed overnight, but because their perspective is changing. What they once viewed as ordinary is beginning to feel extraordinary. What they once overlooked is beginning to stand out. And what they once questioned is beginning to make more sense. Honestly, Taurus, this person seems to be arriving at a very quiet understanding. Not everything valuable announces itself loudly. Not everything meaningful demands attention. Sometimes the most important person in your life is simply the one who consistently shows up with an open heart. The one who creates peace instead of confusion. The one who makes life feel lighter instead of heavier. And I think that understanding is becoming harder and harder for them to ignore. Because the harder it becomes to ignore, the more uncomfortable it becomes to carry. And honestly, Taurus, that's where the energy starts getting heavy. Not dramatic, not loud, just heavy. The kind of weight that settles into someone's chest when they finally stop distracting themselves long enough to feel what they've been avoiding. The Five of Cups is sitting here, and wow, I can feel the emotional shift immediately. This person is spending more time looking backward than they used to. Not because they want to live in the past, but because certain memories keep demanding their attention. Little moments. Conversations that seemed ordinary. Opportunities they assumed would still be there later. I keep hearing this energy of someone saying to themselves, I should have handled that differently. I should have said more. I should have shown up differently. And the thing about regret is that it rarely arrives all at once. It builds, quietly, slowly, one realization at a time. Because every time they think about what you offered, they also have to think about what they gave in return. And for some of them, that's becoming difficult to sit with. You know, there are moments in life when people don't realize the value of something until they're forced to imagine life without it. That's exactly what this feels like. Because what once felt secure suddenly feels uncertain. What once felt available no longer feels guaranteed. And those thoughts seem to be creating a lot of emotional pressure. The Nine of Swords appears, and honestly, I don't feel somebody sleeping very peacefully. I don't mean that literally for everyone, but energetically, this feels like someone whose mind has become very busy. The quiet moments aren't so quiet anymore. Their thoughts keep circling back. Questions keep returning. Memories keep resurfacing. It's almost like their heart keeps bringing them back to the same place, no matter how far they try to wander mentally. And the reason feels surprisingly simple. They know they could have done more. Okay, I have to say, this doesn't feel like somebody blaming themselves for everything. That's not the energy I'm getting. What I'm feeling is somebody becoming honest with themselves. Somebody no longer able to hide behind circumstances. No longer able to hide behind timing. No longer able to hide behind other people's opinions. Because eventually there comes a moment when excuses lose their power. And that's where the judgment card enters. Wow. This card feels incredibly important, not because of some huge event, but because of what is happening internally. This person seems to be standing face to face with their own choices, their own actions, their own silence. And for the first time, they aren't trying to run from that reflection. They're looking directly at it. They're asking themselves difficult questions. Questions that may not have comfortable answers. Questions about what mattered. Questions about who mattered. Questions about whether fear played a bigger role than they wanted to admit. And honestly, Taurus, those questions seem to be changing something inside them, because every answer keeps leading back to the same place. Back to you. The Three of Swords appears here, and the feeling surrounding it is surprisingly vulnerable. This doesn't feel like someone grieving a relationship. It feels like someone grieving missed chances, missed honesty, missed opportunities to say what they truly felt. I keep seeing someone replaying crossroads in their life. Moments where they could have chosen differently. Moments where they could have spoken up. Moments where they could have trusted their heart instead of their fears. And those moments seem much clearer to them now than they did back then. Honestly, that's one of the hardest parts of growth. Seeing things clearly after the moment has already passed. Seeing what was standing right in front of you after you've spent so much time looking somewhere else. And the energy around this person feels deeply reflective because of that. Not hopeless, not defeated, just aware, painfully aware in some moments. Because awareness has a way of illuminating everything we wish we had understood sooner. What keeps coming through strongest is that this person isn't simply missing your presence. They're beginning to miss the version of themselves that existed when they felt connected to you. The version that felt hopeful. The version that felt understood. The version that believed there was still time. And the more they sit with those feelings, Taurus, the more impossible it becomes to pretend that this connection didn't mean far more to them than they once allowed themselves to admit. Because the more impossible it becomes to pretend, the more difficult it becomes to keep living the same way. That's really where the energy starts shifting. Not outwardly at first, internally, quietly. Almost like somebody standing in a dark room for a very long time and suddenly noticing a crack of light coming through a door they never thought to open. The Hermit is the first card pulling my attention here. And honestly, Taurus, this person feels different than they did before. Less reactive. Less concerned with what everybody else is saying. Less interested in chasing distractions. I keep seeing someone pulling away from noise. Pulling away from opinions. Pulling away from influences that once felt important. Because something inside them has started asking a question they can't seem to ignore. What if those people weren't right? Wow. That question feels powerful, not because it immediately changes everything, but because it creates space. Space for reflection, space for honesty, space for this person to start forming their own conclusions. You know, growth often begins with a simple question. A single moment where somebody stops accepting old beliefs without examining them. And that's exactly what this feels like. The things they once accepted as truth no longer fit the way they used to. The stories they told themselves no longer feel complete. The explanations that once brought comfort suddenly feel shallow. And because of that, they're spending more time alone with their thoughts. More time listening. More time observing. More times trying to understand why their heart keeps leading them back toward the same realization. The Death card appears beside this energy, and I have to say, this feels less like an ending and more like someone shedding a version of themselves that no longer feels authentic. The version that always chose safety over honesty. The version that worried more about appearances than emotions. The version that kept waiting for certainty before taking responsibility for what they truly felt. That version seems exhausted. And honestly, Taurus, I think they're exhausted too. Because carrying an identity that doesn't align with your heart becomes incredibly heavy after a while. You can only ignore yourself for so long before something begins asking to be released. And that's what I keep feeling here. Release. Not perfection. Not immediate answers. Just release. the willingness to let go of beliefs that were never truly theirs to begin with. Okay. The energy gets even stronger when the Tower arrives. Wow, there is something about this card that feels deeply personal for this person, because I'm seeing moments where certain assumptions simply stop making sense. Certain fears stop feeling logical. Certain excuses stop feeling convincing. It's almost like walls that once seemed permanent are beginning to crack, not because somebody forced them down, because this person can finally see beyond them. And I keep hearing this thought repeating over and over. What if I've been standing in my own way? Honestly, that realization alone can change everything about how someone sees their life. Because once you recognize that some of your biggest limitations came from fear rather than truth, it's impossible to look at things exactly the same way again. The devil appears here, and what fascinates me is how aware this person is becoming. They are starting to notice patterns in their choices, patterns in their reactions, patterns in the people they listen to, patterns in the situations they stayed attached to long after those situations stopped helping them grow. And for perhaps the first time, they're questioning whether those attachments deserve the power they've been given, not because somebody else told them to, because they genuinely want to know, because something inside them wants freedom. I keep feeling that word very strongly. Freedom. Freedom from expectations. Freedom from old fears. Freedom from roles they've been playing for years. Freedom from becoming the version of themselves everyone expected while ignoring the person they actually are. You know, there comes a point in every growth journey where people stop asking, what do others want from me? And start asking, what feels true to me? That question seems to be guiding this person more than anything right now. And the closer they get to that answer, Taurus, the more willing they become to leave behind anything that asks them to betray themselves in order to keep it. Because the closer they get to that answer, Taurus, the harder it becomes to keep certain feelings locked away. This is where the energy becomes incredibly emotional. Not chaotic, not overwhelming, just deeply human. Because I keep feeling somebody carrying words they've wanted to say for a very long time. Words they've rehearsed privately. Words they've imagined speaking. Words they've started and stopped 100 different times. The King of Cups is the first card catching my attention, and wow! There is so much emotional restraint here. This person feels like someone who has spent a long time trying to appear composed, trying to appear unaffected, trying to convince themselves that they could manage these feelings quietly. But emotions don't disappear simply because they're hidden. They grow. They deepen. They wait. And that's exactly what I feel happening here. The longer they've carried these feelings, the heavier they've become. I keep seeing someone having imaginary conversations with you, thinking about what they would say, thinking about where they would begin, wondering whether they should explain everything, wondering whether an explanation would even matter anymore. You know, one of the hardest things about honesty is realizing that honesty arrives after silence has already created distance. And I think this person understands that. That's why I feel nervousness around them. Not because they don't know what they feel, because they do. They're nervous because they don't know how their truth will be received. Okay, the Knight of Cups is stepping forward now, and honestly, this feels like courage slowly replacing fear. Not all at once, not dramatically. Just little moments where they stop talking themselves out of being vulnerable. Little moments where they stop assuming the worst. Little moments where they begin considering what might happen if they simply spoke from the heart. Because what keeps coming through is sincerity. This doesn't feel rehearsed anymore. It doesn't feel strategic. It feels personal, very personal. Almost like somebody reaching a point where carrying everything internally has become more exhausting than expressing it. Wow. The energy around this person feels softer than it did before, less guarded, less defensive, less concerned with protecting their pride. Because pride isn't really helping them anymore. What they seem to want is understanding. What they seem to want is a chance to be seen clearly. Not as the person who made mistakes, not as the person who hesitated, but as the person who is finally trying to be honest. The Ace of Cups appears, and I have to say, there is something incredibly vulnerable about this moment, because this card feels like emotional truth, pure emotional truth, not filtered through fear, not filtered through expectations, not filtered through what other people think. And I keep feeling this desire within them to tell you things they should have said a long time ago. To acknowledge emotions they tried to rationalize, to admit feelings they kept minimizing, to stop pretending that this connection affected them less than it actually did. Honestly, I think they're becoming tired of pretending, tired of acting stronger than they feel, tired of carrying conversations that only exist in their head, because eventually emotions ask for expression. Eventually the heart asks to be heard, And that's exactly what feels present here. The Eight of Wands brings a different movement into the reading. Not rushed, just ready. Ready in a way this person hasn't been before. I keep seeing thoughts becoming words, words becoming intentions, intentions becoming action. Not because somebody is forcing them, because they're finally reaching a point where silence no longer feels like the right choice. And what fascinates me, Taurus, is that the energy isn't focused on creating a perfect outcome. It's focused on creating an honest moment, a real moment, a moment where masks come off, a moment where explanations are offered, a moment where feelings are allowed to exist without being hidden. You know, there is a difference between wanting someone's attention and wanting someone to understand your heart. This feels much closer to the second, because beneath all of the fear, beneath all of the hesitation, beneath all of the uncertainty, I keep sensing somebody preparing themselves to speak from a place they haven't fully revealed before. And that preparation feels genuine. It feels thoughtful. It feels emotional. Most of all, it feels like someone who finally understands that some truths become too important to leave unspoken, because some truths become too important to leave unspoken. And honestly, Taurus, once someone reaches that point, their focus begins to change. The energy is no longer centered around confusion. It's no longer centered around what went wrong. It's no longer centered around everything they lost. What I'm seeing here is somebody beginning to think about what could actually be built. And wow, that feels very different. The King of Pentacles is the first card drawing my attention, and I have to say, there is something incredibly grounded about this energy. This person seems to be looking beyond temporary emotions for the first time, beyond chemistry, beyond attraction, beyond the excitement of possibility. They're asking deeper questions, questions about consistency, questions about trust, questions about whether a connection can stand the test of real life. And every time they seem to explore those questions, they keep finding themselves returning to the same realization. You brought stability into their world. Not pressure, not confusion, not games. Stability. You know, there are people who enter our lives and make us feel excited, and there are people who make us feel safe. This person appears to be realizing that safety may have been far more valuable than they once understood. Because safety allows people to grow. Safety allows people to be honest. Safety allows people to build something lasting. Okay, the Queen of Pentacles appears beside the King of Pentacles, and honestly, the energy between these two cards feels incredibly natural, not forced, not complicated, natural. I keep seeing somebody imagining what everyday life would actually look like. Simple things, sharing responsibilities, supporting one another, building goals together, creating a life that feels peaceful rather than unpredictable. And what stands out is that these thoughts don't seem driven by fantasy. They feel practical, realistic, mature, the type of thoughts that emerge when somebody starts taking a connection seriously. Because they're no longer asking themselves whether there is potential here, they're beginning to explore what that potential could actually become. Wow, that feels significant. Because earlier in this reading, so much of their attention was scattered. Their attention feels focused now. Focused on what matters. Focused on what lasts. Focused on what feels genuine. The Strength card is coming forward, and there is something beautiful happening here. This person is learning that vulnerability requires courage, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that asks someone to lower their defenses, to stop hiding behind pride, to stop pretending they don't care, to stop running from conversations that matter. And honestly, Taurus, I think they're stronger than they were before. Not because life became easier, because they're becoming more honest with themselves. There is a difference. You know, the strongest people are often the ones willing to face uncomfortable truths rather than avoid them. That's exactly what this feels like. The Wheel of Fortune starts turning in this energy, and I have to smile because everything feels less rigid, less controlled, less fearful. This person seems more open to possibilities than they were before. More willing to trust where life is guiding them. More willing to accept that not every meaningful connection arrives according to a perfect plan. Some arrive unexpectedly. Some challenge us. Some change us. Some reveal parts of ourselves we didn't know existed. And this connection seems to have done exactly that. The more they reflect on everything they've experienced, the more they recognize how much they've grown through knowing you, how much they've learned through knowing you, how much their perspective has changed because of you. The Ten of Pentacles closes this reading in such a beautiful way. Not because it promises anything, but because of what it represents emotionally. It represents vision, the ability to see beyond a single moment, the ability to see beyond temporary circumstances, the ability to imagine a future instead of only reacting to the present. And honestly, Taurus, that's what I feel happening here. This person is no longer looking at this connection through the lens of fear. They're looking at it through the lens of possibility. They are beginning to understand that what they once viewed as ordinary may have actually been something rare, something meaningful, something worth protecting. Most of all, they seem to be arriving at a very quiet but powerful realization. Some people enter our lives to teach us lessons. Some people enter our lives to help us heal. And every once in a while, someone enters our life and shows us what it feels like to finally come home to ourselves. For this person, Taurus, that realization appears to be growing stronger every day they choose to listen to their own heart instead of everyone else's. And honestly, Taurus, sometimes the biggest changes don't begin with action. They begin with awareness. They begin when someone finally stops listening to all the noise around them and starts listening to the truth inside their own heart. Whether this person is still figuring things out, reflecting on the past, or finding the courage to be completely honest with themselves, one thing feels very clear. The way they see this connection is not the same as it once was. So for now, allow yourself to stay grounded in your own energy. Stay focused on your own path. Stay connected to the peace you've worked so hard to create. Because your story is still being written, and not every chapter reveals its meaning all at once. That's all I've got for you for this reading. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I truly appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for allowing me to share this space and this energy with you. Take gentle care of yourself, Taurus. Keep listening to your heart. Keep trusting your journey, and I'll see you in the next reading. Bye for now.